Welcome to At Issue. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm H. Wayne Wilson, and for the next half hour, we're going to be discussing what commonly is referred to as the Superfund sites. Those sites that made the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency list as being the most contaminated across the country. There's something like 1,500 sites altogether over time. We're going to be discussing that, and in particular, a site up in DePue, Illinois, where they are still trying to decide how to treat that particular site. And to lead our discussion, we have Terry Ayers. Terry is with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. He's the manager of the National Priorities List. National Priorities List is governmental speak for?
The Superfund program.
Good enough. And seated to my left, your right, is Eric Bryant. Eric is village president or mayor of the village of DePue. We thank you for coming down and being on the program.
Thank you.
Let's start with a definition. I mean, we hear Superfund site. I think everyone's familiar with the term. We've also heard the term brownfield site. What's the difference between those two?
The Superfund program was started in 1980 by an act of Congress, and they set up a program to assess some of the worst contaminated sites nationally, and they put together a ranking system and looked at a lot of sites nationally and came up with about 200 originally of the worst sites in the country, and put those sites on the National Priorities List, which makes them eligible for Superfund money to clean up those sites. They are usually some of the biggest and worst sites in the country. Brownfield sites is a newer kind of sites that are usually less contaminated and more susceptible to being redeveloped by businesses or companies that want to reuse the land.
We want to talk about 5 sites today, up in LaSalle County, Bureau County, and over in Knox County. We're going to give an overview to the audience of 4 sites, and then we'll get into the DePue site, which is the largest of these sites. Let's first go over to the Galesburg area, Knox County, Copper's Company.
Yeah, the Copper site is a wood treating site. They treat railroad ties with creosote. They started operations in 1907, a little over 100-acre site. They used to pressure treat virgin wood ties and pressure treat with creosote or pentachlorophenol. They'd take the ties and let in years past, and let the creosote drip on the ground, cause a lot of soil contamination and groundwater contamination. That site has been cleaned up. The construction is complete on that site. There's still ongoing groundwater collection and treatment going on at the site.
And that was treated biologically?
Right. The site was cleaned up using a biological treatment. The contaminated soil was dug up on the site, placed in a stockpile, and then a land farm was constructed that had the soil brought out, the contaminated soil brought out in lifts, mixed with fertilizer, actually cow manure, and kept at optimum moisture, and then farmed, turned over occasionally, and over about a 3-year period, the creosote was consumed by bacteria and brought down to acceptable levels. So it was one of the first creosote sites that used this land farming technique.
Let's look at a couple of sites up in LaSalle County. LaSalle Electric is one of them.
Yeah, LaSalle Electric started in the 1940s, went bankrupt in 1981, but they were in the business of producing PCB capacitors and polychlorinated biphenyls, which was a cooling fluid for capacitors, small and like the large ones you used to see on power poles outside your home. The PCBs have since been banned from production in the U.S., but the operation there was kind of a messy operation, and they dumped the PCBs out behind the plant site. The trucks that came in and out of the facility tracked the PCBs down into neighborhoods up to half mile down the road. And so a lot of residential yards, over 100, became contaminated with PCBs. We had to remove 23,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil from residential areas. We took it back to the site and used a mobile incinerator to burn the contamination out of the soil.
Remediation is complete?
Yes, that site's completed.
Matheson and Hegler is also up in that area.
Right. Matheson Hegler is a relatively new site on the Superfund list. It's an old zinc smelter. They started operation back in 1858 and operated until 1978 when they went bankrupt. It's a 180-acre site right in the middle of the remedial investigation feasibility study. So they're studying how deep the contamination is and how bad it is, where the contamination's gone. There's lead, zinc, copper, and chromium, and there's a lot of slag that's still piled on the site.
Possibly one of the more famous sites of all the Superfund sites is the Ottawa radiation site, where the women would actually paint radium paint on the dials of watches.
Right. Radium Dial and then a separate company, Luminous Process, operated at that site from 1920 to 1978, producing watches and clocks that had luminous dials on them. We know now that that luminous paint that glows in the dark contained radium-226, which is a radioactive element. We identified 14 separate sites in the Ottawa area that contained contaminated soil with radium in it. 12 of those sites have been cleaned up at a cost of about $18 million. There are 2 sites left, some of the 2 bigger sites that are left. The estimated price tag of those is $80 million for cleanup.
Let's turn our attention to DePue. It's known as New Jersey Zinc Site is what it's referred to. So if we ever refer to New Jersey Zinc, you know, that's DePue. This is a site that is much larger than the previous 4 we've talked about 950 acres so far is being considered. 560 of the 950 are Lake DePue, so there is a lot. There are a lot of issues to discuss here. Just real briefly, the background to the New Jersey Zinc.
Yes, New Jersey Zinc, or some of the prior companies, began zinc smelting in 1905. They continuously operated until 1989 when they ceased operations. Like you said, the site's about 950 acres in size. Another 1,000 acres are potentially contaminated from these sites. The slag from the site contains zinc, lead, cadmium, and in smaller concentrations of a lot of other metals. We know now the plant site soils are very contaminated with metals from the site. Lake DePue, a lot of the sediments are contaminated with these metals. And we have 4 separate remedial investigation feasibility studies going at this site. One for the phosphogypsum stack, one for the plant site, another for the off-site soils, another for Lake DePue.
Let me turn to the mayor. Your constituents are, in your terms, frustrated. What are the concerns? I mean, you understand this is a very, very large site. So what is the concern, the most immediate concern?
Well, the most immediate concern is our lake, but the process just seems like it takes so long to get where we've gotten so far in the last 14 years. We became a Superfund site in 1995, and so far there's only really a couple areas, a couple operable units that have been really cleaned up. And you know, there are 3 more to go, and the most important one to us right now is our lake. And you know, we feel right now that you know, we're in a battle to save our Lake DePue, and we're looking at the EPA, you know, and hoping that they're going to make the right decision down the road to have our lake restored.
I sense that you look at Lake DePue as the future of the village of DePue.
You're correct. Our village is, to put it bluntly, I guess, is pretty much dying. We are not excuse me, able to attract any business. We feel the future of our village is this lake. It is a natural harbor to the river. We think it could be a great economic boost to our community if we were able to get this lake restored. And we feel this is our only shot in order to get that done.
14 years, Terry. What takes so long? I mean, we've already talked about the size. It could be as much as 2,000 acres, but What's taking so long?
I think what's taking so long is probably the extent of the site. The original footprint of the site has grown. The acreage has grown with our understanding of the site, and the samples that have been taken just show a steadily increasing size of the site, and it's had an effect, and not a good effect, on Lake DePue, surrounding areas. Show the footprint of this contamination, and so it's taken a while, and I agree longer than it should, but to get the extent of this site known, how bad it's affected groundwater, and how bad it's affected Lake DePue. It's taken a lot of man hours, a lot of study to get there, and I think we've got a timeline now to finish activities at the site. But it is a large site with evidently large problems.
Does the fact that there are so many contaminants, we're talking about arsenic, lead, zinc, cadmium, diammonium phosphate, something we probably most of us never heard of before. With so many different contaminants, does that complicate this thing?
It complicates it somewhat in that when we're looking at the effect of these metals on human health and the environment, you have to analyze each one of those contaminants for its effect on the human population and on, say, the geese and the ducks and the bald eagles that use Lake DePue, and the fish that are in Lake DePue. And so each one of those has a little different effect that has to be kind of analyzed for what its effect is on the environment.
There was a public hearing August the 12th up in your village. So you've had opportunities for input. Are you getting enough input into the process as they go through this decision making?
In my own opinion, no. We feel left out in the whole situation. There is a consent order that was signed by the Illinois EPA and the responsible parties, and basically those are the people that are deciding what's going to be done. I understand that we will be having a public hearing when the decision is made in early 2011, but to me that seems a little bit too late. It seems like we should have some input in what's going on between now and then, so that we can better understand what's going on and hopefully maybe have a little influence on what happens with our Superfund site.
Aren't you free to provide input along the way?
Well, there are meetings that go on that the EPA comes up with a process to do something, to remediate something, and then there is a response from the responsible parties. We can call and talk, but as far as having any real voice in what goes on, those are the two parties that make the decisions. EPA comes up with a decision. The responsible parties either object or come up with some solution in between. And we have never had any influence or a part of those decisions.
Is that a fair assessment? They don't have any influence?
Well, the process that's set up in Superfund is meant to have a large degree of public input into the process, and so that when remedies are proposed, which eventually a remedy will be proposed for Lake DePue, there'll be remedies in this feasibility study. The agency, Illinois EPA, per our consent decree with the Viacom Mobile, has the authority, the sole authority, to select the remedy for the cleanup option of the lake.
That's by law?
That's by law. And when that remedy goes into a proposed plan, and it's a full discussion and rationale for selecting that remedy, that proposed plan will go public. We will schedule a public hearing in DePue. Not only will responsible parties be involved, the public will be involved, the Village of DePue will be fully involved with that, and we will give a presentation of the remedy. We will ask for questions and comments from everybody, and we will take all of those comments and questions into account. In fact, we have to write a responsiveness summary, in response to each one of those comments and say why we, if we agree with them, we disagree with their comments, whatever, and that goes into a record of decision that is ultimately produced that is kind of the remedy, a recording of the remedy that we select for this site.
But you don't feel like they're listening? I mean, you including on this program, you're having input into the EPA.
Yes.
Are you concerned they're not hearing you, or what?
Well, I believe they're hearing us. I am mainly concerned with one of the choices that they have in the remediation of our lake. And one of them that is on the table is to do nothing. So to just leave the lake die and become a major wetlands. And this is what we're trying to prevent from happening. And through the media, we feel that is our only way of going about doing that, to get our story out there and to try and put as much pressure or influence on those people that are making those decisions to make the decision to clean the lake up.
For clarification, we're talking about contamination in the lake bottom, in the silt that's at the bottom of the lake, primarily?
That's correct. That's
even
correct.
though there is some in the water?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So why is doing nothing one of the options?
The law requires that in each feasibility study that a no action alternative is analyzed, and the reason for that is that it provides a comparison for other potential remedies that are in the feasibility study, and so it's kind of a comparison point of if you do nothing, what does it cost? If you do nothing, what environmental results are there? What are the results on wildlife? What are the results on humans if you do nothing? It's very seldom selected a no-action alternative in a feasibility study, but it's there for the most part for comparison purposes.
Let me go back to the lake issue. And the village owns about 10% of the lake.
Correct.
ExxonMobil, one of the two parties involved, CBS Viacom's the other, it owns about 15%. And then IDNR, Department of Natural Resources, owns 75%, 3/4 of that lake. Are you sensing that they don't care about the future of that lake? I mean, are you really concerned that one of the options, that do nothing option, might actually be the remedy?
It's on the table. It's got me worried. I, don't feel it should be an option at all. I know it's part of the law, but maybe there's something wrong with the consent order and how those things are developed. I'm not sure that this, the consent order is specific enough for our Superfund site. I have some issues with some of the ways that they've gone about some things, but when that's on the table and it's a choice, I'm worried. It worries me that could be something that happens. So I don't feel we can sit back and not have input on what's going on. So if there's another option, I'd sure love to hear it.
What are the reasonable options other than doing nothing?
A couple options that are usually done on these sites, and certainly this is not the whole range of remedies for this kind of sites, but typically with contaminated sediments, they are dredged out of the lake they're in, hydraulically or mechanically, and then that contaminated dredge is put in a landfill with a bottom liner and a top liner. And so essentially a landfill has to be created for these contaminated sediments. Another remedy that's typically selected is particularly those sites that are deeper in depth. They put a subsurface cap over the contaminated sediments, a foot or two of clay or other soils are placed over that contaminated sediment so that it's no longer likely that fish or wildlife will come in contact with it or ingest it.
How deep is the lake?
Right now at the race course area where we hold a national championship race course, there's about 4 foot of water. And that is just the center part of the lake. The race course size probably a mile around, But the rest of the lakes, right now at low pool, is about 4 or 5 inches of water. You cannot get to the river.
So a cap, as we call it, that doesn't sound, I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot in terms of this is, but that doesn't sound like it might be the best alternative.
No, not for this situation. Just off the top of my head, it doesn't sound too feasible.
So if, and I'm not predicting, I don't have a crystal ball, but let's just look at the issue of removing the silt. How much silt are we talking about?
Ballpark estimates to get the lake down to a usable depth roughly is about 5 million cubic yards of sediment and silt that needs to come out of the lake.
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of material to
put somewhere.
Yeah, I mean a lot of small landfills at capacity they're at 5 million cubic yards, so it's a lot of material to get rid of.
The point, the point that worries me about that is the usable depth. You know, our lake used to be 20 foot deep, and there are springs in that lake. You know, that once was a spring-fed lake, so I'm not sure how deep usable is. The last time they dredged the race course, it was about 7-8 feet. That was usable in that area, but it has, you know, since become very close to being unusable.
Is the silt so contaminated that the option of when you take it out, it has to go into a lined landfill?
You know, that issue is kind of still being assessed. We've done the sampling, the remedial investigations done for the lake. You know, I haven't reviewed that in detail. That's still under review right now.
Okay.
But a third of the lake looks like you'd have trouble finding a home because it's that contaminated. 2/3 of it, you know, not so bad. But generally speaking, when we have contaminated sediments, they're going to have to go into a constructed kind of a landfill that's meant to contain these kind of wastes.
There are some concerns over health issues. There appear to be some elevated levels of multiple sclerosis.
Yes, 1990s there was a survey done, and there was I believe it was 9 cases during this certain time period that was considered quite higher than the normal rate. I believe since then there was a study done by University of Illinois. This was like 2002, and they only did like a 5-year time period, and only people that were in town, not people that moved out of town. So they did not find a high rate, but we honestly don't feel that survey was for real. I mean, it's flawed. I mean, it just didn't use the proper timetable or people that used to live there.
Has there been a direct tie between these particular contaminants and MS or cancer?
Well, that stuff is, as far as I know, it's very, very hard to tell how some of these heavy metals affect people in the long term. But it is, I'm almost certain that the cadmium and lead and stuff are definitely heavy metals that can cause serious illness.
You have a lawsuit pending against Viacom and ExxonMobil. The purpose of that is?
Well, basically it's in violation of an ordinance, village ordinance of contaminating our property and not cleaning it up. And we have failed in our first 2 attempts and are currently have an amended process going on with the 3rd one.
Terry, real briefly, timetable for the plan to come out.
I think we're talking early 2011 to get the remedies selected for Lake DePue, and the other parts of the site kind of follow, I think, shortly thereafter. I can't recall.
2016 is the timeline for the completion of all the sites. And if that's the case, I'd be happy.
So complexity of this, size of this, all make it a very slow process.
Yeah, I think It's a methodical process based on a lot of samples being analyzed and then put into a series of reports that give us a picture of the site, not only how big is the site, which has gotten bigger over time, but how deep the sediments are contaminated in Lake DePue, how bad the groundwater is, and there are a few yards in town, residential yards, that have some of this slag in them, and some of those yards are going to need to have that material removed.
And thank you so much. We are out of time. Terry Ayers of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, a manager of the Superfund sites for the state of Illinois. Eric Bryant, who is the mayor of the village of DePue, thank you so much for sharing. Obviously, we'll be talking about this in the future.
Thank you.
We thank you for joining us on At Issue. For the next 3 weeks, At Issue is going to be on hiatus, so we have other programming in place. We'll be back in 4 weeks with another edition of At Issue. Thank you for being with us.